Yo. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? It's awesome to see you a little bit earlier here in the week as we are dropping the wide receiver video on Tuesday instead of Wednesday. Switching it up just a little bit this week. Jake, as you know, was out enjoying time with the fam and his son this past weekend. He's just getting back into town, so I said, you know what? Let me do my videos a day earlier, give you a little bit of a chance to get back in and get settled in. So we decided to switch it up this week. So here we are, Tuesday, and it's time to start talking about wide receivers with our start and sit analysis here for week 7 of the NFL season. Now, before we get started, we got to talk about our accuracy report from last week. So let's go ahead and throw it up onto the screen right now. Last week coming in at 60%. So not the best week, obviously, but we had some really big names miss. I mean, in the same games too. I mean, Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool had a good matchup, but both of them ended up missing. Metcalf and Lockett, both of them ended up missing. Evans and Godwin ended up missing. Marquise Brown ended up missing. So a lot of big names last week again ended up falling under that 10 fantasy points that we need for them to be a start in half PPR formats. So let's take a look to week 7 now. And even though that percentage is low, I'm really excited to share with you guys the tight end percentage. Ooh, may have been my best week ever. But hey, you got to watch the tight end video for that. So ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, if you want to win our October giveaway, there's only one way that you can do that, and that's by going over to Prize Picks, downloading their app, or signing up for an account on their website, either or, using code word headliners when you sign up for a new account, and deposit at least $20. Now, Prize Picks is going to match your $20 deposit, or they'll even go up to $100 if you decide to go that spicy with the deposit. And you're going to be entered for this October giveaway right here below. So much that you can get out of this package: a Manscaped Perfect package, a signed jersey, I mean, look at a pylon. Look at everything that you can get here. Why wouldn't you want to try and sign up? Do it right now. Make sure that you get in on the drawing. But ladies and gentlemen, it is time to roll, because we got to talk about the week 7 matchups for wide receivers. Thursday Night Football is going to kick us off with Denver heading into Cleveland. Now, Cleveland is really banged up right now. All over the place on defense. Baker Mayfield, dislocated shoulder. He's trying to play through something right now. OBJ had to come off the field again. Jarvis Landry's just now getting healthy. Nick Chubb is hurt. Kareem Hunt is hurt. So, I mean, Cleveland just dealing with so many injuries all over the place right now. For the Denver Broncos, though, Courtland Sutton, Tim Patrick are going to be starts for me, because it doesn't look like Jerry Jeudy is going to be back this week. I mean, it looked like Vic Fangio said that Jerry Jeudy was probably less than 50% at a chance of playing this week. So we're going to leave him in the injured out doubtful section for this week. Going to go with Courtland Sutton and Tim Patrick. The Browns, the last couple of weeks, they have allowed the third most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. Now, they have played some teams that are better than the Broncos, obviously, but even with that being said, that defense really banged up right now, just not playing as well as it did at points last season. They're struggling. They're struggling, inconsistent at times. And for Tim Patrick, with no Jerry Jeudy back, he's still the wide receiver 2 in this offense, averaging 7 targets a game over the last 3 games. So he could end up being a pretty decent pick this week, especially if it's a game where there's a lot of back and forth. For the Cleveland Browns, Odell Beckham Jr. and Donovan Peoples-Jones are going to end up being starts for me this week. Jarvis Landry in his first week back will be a sit. Now, why is that? Well, Denver, their slot cornerback, nickel cornerback. Someone brought that up last week. They were like, Kyle, it's nickel corner. I get that, but there's some people, like, if I say nickel cornerback, they're not going to get it. If I say slot corner, they're going to be like, oh yeah, they play in the slot against a slot wide receiver. So that's why I say that. But anyway, so Bryce Callahan, who plays in the slot for Denver on defense, he's allowing a catch rate of only 44.4%. That is an incredibly low catch rate. And now Jarvis Landry, his first week back from injury, going up against that, that's going to be tough. The Broncos are kind of in the same boat. Over the last couple of weeks, they've allowed the 5th most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. And that was against the Steelers and the Raiders. So, I mean, it's not like they were, allowing a bunch of points to super uber high tier teams, right? Denver has allowed 448 yards on 24 receptions the last 2 weeks. That's only 18. That's over 18 yards per reception. That is a lot of yards on a small amount of receptions. They have one of the biggest differences in the NFL over the last 2 weeks on defense. So for Donovan Peoples-Jones, who had a huge game last week, probably going to be seeing that cornerback 2 coverage on the outside. I would not be surprised if he were to haul in a big play this week. Washington at Green Bay, and for Terry McLaurin, I would love this matchup for him, except he is super beat up right now. But you can't sit him in this matchup and I'll talk about this in a minute when we get to the Chicago game. But last week when Chicago played Green Bay, I mean, it could have been a lot worse than what it was, but it wasn't. Why? Because the Bears are still holding Justin Fields back. We'll talk about that, okay? We'll talk about that later. So, when they were pushing the ball down the field, they were seeing a little bit of success against this Green Bay defense. Terry McLaurin, for me, even though he is a little bit banged up, we got to roll with him. But Dyami Brown is the guy to really keep an eye on this week, because if Terry McLaurin is beat up again and we're throwing the ball against Green Bay quite a bit, which we'll probably be doing, 6 targets in his return last week. He is a big play guy, so we're keeping an eye on him. If McLaurin ends up being out for some reason, or if he ends up being if he ends up being limited for some reason, if he isn't 100%, whatever it may be, Dyami Brown is going to be a guy that we're going to want to keep an eye on there. Kind of stumbled there for a second. I've got Monday Night Football on with me while I'm trying to do this recording as well, because I try to do it in the middle of halftime. I started a few minutes early though. But anyway, something caught my eye and I was taking a look at it. For Green Bay, Davante Adams. Washington is allowing the 2nd most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. Remember that? Remember that game a couple of weeks ago with Davante Adams? 200 yards, 16 targets, all the good stuff. Woo, baby. We could be seeing another pretty big performance. And for Lazard, Cobb, Rodgers, right now, those wide receiver 2s, they just keep on rotating. So you can't really trust any of them because, it might be one guy one week, but then it might be another guy another week. It's just not something that you love to see. Kansas City versus Tennessee, and Tennessee continues to be one of the teams in the league that just can't stop the pass on a consistent basis. Giving up some big plays, not really being able to shut down wide receivers when it matters most. And when you've got Tyreek Hill going against them, again, maybe another stud with a huge performance this week. But I am also going to start Mecole Hardman this week, because over the last 2 weeks, he has 13 receptions on 17 targets and 138 receiving yards. And when you're going up against a team like Tennessee, who's given up a lot of yards through the air, you got to expect that Mecole Hardman, if he breaks one away, he's going to hit those 10 fantasy points. Now, for the Tennessee Titans, A.J. Brown, ended up getting sick on Saturday this past week, says it was food poisoning, didn't look 100% healthy during the game on Monday night. And then for Julio Jones, he's back, he's healthy, great to see. So I'm going to start both of these. Kansas City has been pretty good against the pass overall, but over the last 4 weeks, they've allowed the 10th most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. So because of that, this is obviously a situation where Kansas City, they just don't look like their old dominant self, right? And because of that, it's leading teams to be playing against them with a little bit more confidence. And when that happens, guys are putting up some better statistics. Atlanta at Miami. For the Atlanta Falcons, we're going to go with Calvin Ridley. Did I add an extra syllable? Oh my gosh. We're going to go with Calvin Ridley this week as a start. Miami has allowed the most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. 46 fantasy points per game. to be exact, to wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. Russell Gage is expected back this week, it looks like, but he's not going to be a start for me. Cordero Patterson is just getting way too many touches and way too many targets to even consider anybody outside of Ridley, him, or Kyle Pitts right now. And then, of course, again, going up against the Miami Dolphins. I mean, Devontae Parker, not sure of his status as of yet, so I'm going to list him as injured out, doubtful for right now, but keep an eye on it. Adding Matt Collins to the list this week because he's been the wide receiver with no Fuller or no Parker out there. But Jalen Waddle's been the wide receiver 1 last week. Huge week for Jalen Waddle. 10 receptions on 13 targets, 70 receiving yards, ended up scoring twice. It's good to see Tua connecting with him. I was concerned, how's Tua looking? How is he feeling? I had Waddle listed as a start last week. I was a little bit lower on him in the rankings just because I didn't know what Tua was going to look like. But oh man, that connection once again looked fantastic. The New York Jets at New England, and the last time these two teams faced off, Zach Wilson did not look good. So is it going to be the same thing this time out? It's hard to say. I'm still going to list a couple of guys as starts here for the Jets, though, going with Corey Davis and Jamison Crowder. Why? Because we know that this is probably going to be another tough matchup, right? But the volume will still probably be there. The Jets can't run the football to save their lives right now. They don't really have a tight end that's taking any type of volume away from the wide receivers. New England very well could be up in this game, meaning that they're going to have to pass it, and the volume alone could get both of these guys to 10 half PPR points. That's why I'm still going to play both of them this week, even though I don't really trust either of them, because just the situation leads us to believe it could still turn out to be a decent floor, even if the ceiling isn't up here. For the New England Patriots, I'm sitting all 3 of these guys. I'm sitting all 3 of these guys this week. I don't see a good floor for anyone here. I see them spreading the ball around a lot, and as I'll talk about in the tight end video, I see the tight ends doing something this week. Surprisingly enough, the New York Jets, they allow the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers this season. And I would love to start Jakobi Meyers, but he just can't score. He scores less than the dude in high school that let the girls copy off of his homework, and he got friend zoned all the time. Okay, he scored less than that dude. That's what's happening so far in his NFL career. So because of that, there's just not a high floor for any of these guys this week. So I expect them to run the football. I expect the tight ends to be involved. I expect both of these guys, or all 3 of these guys, to get looks. But unless one of them scores, it's just not going to be worth it. Carolina going up against the New York Giants. DJ Moore is going to be a start for me. Why? Well, he's 4th in the league in targets right now. We're not sitting DJ Moore. Even in a matchup going up against New York, a team that has been able to at times limit some of the passing upside of other teams, DJ Moore, I expect him to see volume. Robbie Anderson, I mean, he had 11 targets last week. He saved you with a touchdown, right? If you ended up playing him, he saved you with a touchdown. He didn't get you a whole lot, but he had 11 targets last week, and he has 29 targets over the last 3 weeks. Like I told you last week, right now, if you need a wide receiver 3 with all the injuries we have, with all the bye weeks we have, you can find guys that are far riskier than Robbie Anderson. Why? Because Robbie Anderson is getting the targets over and over and over. They just haven't turned into anything. And we don't have Christian McCaffrey. Terrace Marshall Jr. hasn't done anything. And Tommy Tremble or Ian Thomas aren't making an impact. So yes, Robbie Anderson, he's going to probably drive you nuts, but the volume is there. He just hasn't turned it into anything. You can find worse options than Robbie Anderson this week. For the New York Giants, there's a lot of red here in this slide again. You don't see the red on your side. It's red on my side when I put this here, though. Kenny Golladay, Darius Slayton, Kadarius Toney, I have all listed as injured out, doubtful this week, because as of this recording, I haven't heard any updates on whether or not these guys can play. Kenny Golladay and Slayton out last week. Obviously, Kadarius Toney ended up getting hurt. John Ross, Dante Pettis, both going going to be sits for me, even though Pettis did see a lot of targets last week, 11 to be exact. Sterling Shepard in his week back looked really, really good, which was great to see. Big return last week, 10 receptions on 14 targets for 76 yards, going up against that tough Rams defense last week. Now we get Carolina, who in their own right is on the tougher side, but they're not nearly as tough like Sterling Shepard this week for you guys who need to get him in there and just get some decent points. In a huge battle of the AFC North, Cincinnati and Baltimore going to be hooking up this week. For Cincinnati, Ja'Marr Chase and Tyler Boyd are going to be my starts. Now, Ja'Marr Chase, his ceiling is a lot lower for me this week than it has been in the past. If Marlon Humphrey ends up lining up across from Ja'Marr Chase, that's going to be really, really tough. Marlon Humphrey is allowing 51% completion percentage right now on targets his way. So barely half of the passes that come his way are being completed right now. T. Higgins on the other side, if he ends up seeing Marlon Humphrey, that's a huge issue for Higgins. He becomes a sit, and Ja'Marr Chase is still a start with a little bit more upside, but not a ton. So on the outside, the wide receivers on the outside, their ceiling this week is really low for me. Tyler Boyd, though, I like him because their slot cornerback, Tavon Young, allows 84% of the passes coming his way to be completed. And going up against Baltimore, where they're likely going to be throwing the ball a whole lot, you're going to have to see some Tyler Boyd this week going up against Baltimore. Now for the Baltimore Ravens, going up against Cincinnati, Marquise Brown, he's still the wide receiver 6 on the season, so we're going to go back to him even after a down week 6. And for Rashad Bateman, I see a lot of people saying right now, especially for the Bateman truthers, and I like Bateman. I've got nothing against him. But listen, for the Bateman truthers that are out there tweeting, oh, Rashad Bateman led the Ravens in targets this week. He had 6 targets to Marquise Brown's 5. And Marquise Brown had a really tough matchup. So calm down a little bit, everybody. I love Bateman, but he's not the wide receiver 1 in this offense. He's not going to be. Now, I even said it in the waiver wire show that Rashad Bateman could be a really, really good upside play on the weeks that Marquise Brown has the cornerback 1 coverage, and it is a tougher matchup. But I'm not willing to go down that route yet, okay? This week going against Cincinnati, Marquise Brown, still could end up being a tough matchup, but it's not nearly big enough for me to go to Rashad Bateman because Mark Andrews has been absolutely on fire, and they're still trying to run the ball an awful lot. Every week in the comments, I get it. Why you out here disrespecting Devontae Smith? And first off, listen, I am saying Devontae Smith. Do you need me to enunciate it for? I'm not saying Devonta Smith. I'm saying Devontae Smith. Do you need me to say Devontae so you can hear it better? I keep getting no comment every saying 2 things about Devontae Smith. Number 1, people keep saying I'm saying his name wrong. I'm not saying his name wrong. And number 2, they keep talking about I'm disrespecting. I'm not disrespecting Devontae Smith. Do y'all watch the game and see how bad Jalen Hurts is for a majority of the game? The dude can't pass to save his life right now. He's inaccurate. He's all over the place. He's inconsistent. And that's hurting Smith. And now we're going up against Las Vegas, who has been getting better and better and better against the pass. I mean, over the last 4 weeks, they've allowed the fourth fewest fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. And over the last few weeks, that includes the Broncos, Bears, and Chargers, okay? Chargers, obviously, one heck of a good team. The Bears, they've got Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney that you've got to shut down. Yeah, they haven't been passing it as much. And the Broncos with Teddy B, and you've got Cortland Sutton out there. I mean, those are the exponential teams like the Chargers, but still teams that've got some decent weapons that you got to shut down. So Las Vegas has been getting better and better and better as the season's gone on, going up against the pass, and they cause a lot of pressure. And when you cause a lot of pressure against Jalen Hurts, what does he do? Well, he either throws horrible passes or he just takes off running. So I'm not starting anybody from Philadelphia this week. I just can't do it. And for the Las Vegas Raiders, we're going to double up because I'm not going to start anyone from this team either, because Philly, They allow the fourth fewest fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers as well. So they're also pretty good on defense when it comes to shutting down the wide receivers. Henry Ruggs, he only has 3 relevant performances this year. I'm going to move. I thought about starting him. I don't think this is a great matchup. I'm wondering if we don't see a whole lot of the tight ends and a lot of work to the running backs this week. For Henry Ruggs, he's going to have to go boom. Like, he's going to have a huge play. If he doesn't have that huge play, he's not going to be a start. Detroit gets to head out to LA and see their former quarterback, Matthew Stafford, and his new digs. I'm scared for the Lions this week. I'm not going to lie. Matthew Stafford doesn't seem like a revengeful guy. I mean, at this point, he's obviously with a better team. He's moved on. But you don't think that he's not going to want to have a great game against the Lions? You don't think he's going to want to put up some numbers? Yeah, he will. For the Detroit Lions, though, Khalif Raymond, Amon-Ra St. Brown, KhaDarel Hodge, they're the 3 wide receivers right now. And here's the thing. If the wide receivers are getting 7 targets a game, that's great, right? But if they're only averaging 7 yards per reception, they're not doing anything. They're not getting close to 10 half PPR points. So the targets are there for the wide receivers right now, but if they're only averaging 7 yards of reception, it's not doing anything. So I'm not going with anybody. I'm not going with anybody at a wide receiver position right now for the Detroit Lions. For the LA Rams, I'm going Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, and Van Jefferson. I'm scared to death to see what Stafford's going to do. I think he's going to try and push the ball down the field. I think they're going to be throwing the ball a whole lot. I'm going to go with all 3 of these guys against a Lions defense that, again, is missing top cornerbacks, has been banged up all year, is not that great, even though they've played above their ability at times. Even though they don't have a win yet, they have shown a little bit of moxie this year, right? But no, they're going in to face one of the best teams in the NFL and their former cornerback. I expect it to be tough for them. Houston against Arizona, and for the Houston Texans, Brandon Cooks. He's got so many targets, you got to put him out there, right? But you can only really rely on him as your wide receiver 3 right now because Houston's just not getting into the red zone enough, right? I mean, if Brandon Cooks is scoring, it's got to be a huge play. It's not going to be red zone targets or anything like that. They're just having too much trouble pushing the ball down the field into the red zone to score on a consistent basis. The other 3 wide receivers that are seeing a decent amount of targets right now, though, with Conley, Collins, and Moore, just not interested in any of those guys. And going up against Arizona, for Arizona, Hopkins, Green, and Kirk. Here's the thing. So obviously DeAndre Hopkins, huge performance last week, right? Huge performance last week. Was great to see. Will there be enough volume, though? Because if Arizona gets up early, we could just see a whole lot of Connor and a whole lot of Edmonds, okay? They could just start running the football a little bit more. So DeAndre Hopkins, yeah, we're smashing the start button on him automatically. But AJ Green and Christian Kirk, Kirk's only averaging 10.4 points per game right now, and AJ Green's only averaging 9.7. So, when you guys look at my rankings during the week and I see some comments about how AJ Green needs to be higher or Kirk needs to be higher, I get why you think that because they've had some really good performances. But on the consistency level, they just haven't been that consistent. Yeah, they're having some really good performances, but their other performances are all the way down here. I mean, these are guys that are barely averaging enough points to be considered starts. They got to be 10 points for me to get them as a start. So this week against Houston, I definitely think the opportunity is going to be there, but just how much volume will be there for them. Chicago at Tampa Bay is going to bring my Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week. Our friends over at Manscaped are here again with us as a sponsor this NFL season. If you need to take care of the boys down below, there's no better place to help you out with that than manscaped.com. And if you go over there and you decide to make a purchase, use code word headliners at checkout because you're going to get 20% off your entire purchase and you're going to get free shipping. So thanks again to our friends over at Manscaped. They're going to be sponsoring my must-watch matchup of the week, Chicago at Tampa Bay. And why is this a must-watch matchup for me? Because we got a lot of guys that we want to see bounce back this week. Allen Robinson, we want to see bounce back this week, 100%. And you all think that I'm crazy. All of you think that I'm crazy for sticking on Allen Robinson. But if you're watching the Chicago Bears games, you can see that this is a team that is very close. But they're being held back by their coaching staff right now. And for Allen Robinson, if you don't want to start him, that's fine. Put him on the bench. But if you're dropping Allen Robinson, you're going to regret it at some point this season. We're heading into week 7. We still have over half the season left at this point for Allen Robinson and Justin Fields to really grow that connection, turn things around, and get moving on the offensive side of the ball. Hopefully this coaching staff figures it out. Matt Nagy, I'm going to have to find you and give you a little roundhouse to the side of the head to knock some sense into you. Last week, when they were playing Green Bay, when they were just letting Justin Fields play quarterback, look how good he looked. Yes, there are some inconsistencies. You're going to see that with most rookie quarterbacks. But he was letting the ball fly down the field to Darnell Mooney and Allen Robinson at times. But the problem is they keep trying to work in this short passing game, and they're not stretching the field. They're scared to have Justin Fields lose the game for them instead of going out and letting him try to win it. And they're running the ball over and over and over. When Chicago was down by like 17 points at one point this weekend, they came out and ran the ball on 3 of their first 4 plays of the second half. Why? You don't need to establish the run, Chicago. Throw the freaking football, okay? That's why this team drives me nuts right now, okay? So Tampa Bay has been, let's get back to the matchup though. Tampa Bay has been much better recently per the numbers, but don't be fooled, right? They have lots of injuries, lots of injuries. Since the LA Rams beat them in week 3, they faced the Pats, Dolphins, and Eagles. So they haven't given up a ton of fantasy points to opposing wide receivers recently, but the matchups haven't been the best matchups either. So because of that, it does look a little bit better than it is, but Richard Sherman's done right now. I mean, the Tampa Bay and the secondary, they're beat up. So this could definitely be an opportunity for Justin Fields to get a little something going this week, hopefully. And for the Tampa Bay Bucks, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Antonio Brown. The matchup doesn't matter. If you drafted one of these guys, more than likely you got to play them. But just like last week, right? It could be the same thing. We've seen it happen this year several times where Chris Godwin is the wide receiver 1, and then maybe the other 2 guys get a little bit afterwards. Now, one thing that hurt this past week is that O.J. Howard was used so much, okay? I don't expect that to happen this week, and we'll talk about that in the tight end video. But I expect a little bit more for Godwin, Evans, and Brown this week, okay? What we got to do with this team against Chicago Bears, a team that can get into the backfield decently quick, we got to have those quick passes, right? Antonio Brown and Chris Godwin definitely are the ones to help out with that. Mike Evans, I'm hoping we got some TD upside. I don't know if the volume will be there for him this week, but it's the touchdown that I'm looking at for Mike Evans this week. Indianapolis and San Francisco, and I'm going to have to put Michael Pittman and Zach Pascal as starts. Going to have to probably throw it more than likely, and the opportunity for Pittman and Pascal with Campbell and T.Y. Hilton potentially missing is just too much to pass up on this week. Going up against San Francisco, a team that's been good at times, but not great by any means. Carson Wentz looked a lot better last week. The offense is starting to look like they're gelling a little bit more, and because of that, I just like Pittman and Pascal this week, and a matchup where there is some upside for them. And for San Francisco, Debo's on fire right now, but he is the only viable option at wide receiver. Brandon Ayuk is going to be a sit for me right now because until I can see some more consistency out of him, I just can't trust him. Nolans at Seattle. Michael Thomas, I don't expect him back this week. It sounds like it's going to be at least a couple of more weeks for him. So just to update you all, I don't think we see him soon. Marquez Callaway is going to be my only start for me. This is not the same old Seahawks defense, right? This is a defense that's been a lot worse over the course of this year than what they have been in years past. But I mean, this past week against the Pittsburgh Steelers, they did cause some issues. They did look a little bit better. Missing one of their pass rushers, though. This is a team that just, yes, you can push them to the brink of breaking at times. Last week, they just didn't end up breaking. So for Marquez Callaway, he's the guy that I look at this week and I say, yeah, he could probably see the most volume on this team. But I think we see a lot of Alvin Kamara this week. And for the San Francisco 49er, or excuse me, for the Seattle Seahawks, I've got the Seattle tab right next to the San Francisco tab. For the Seattle Seahawks, back to DK Metcalf, back to Tyler Lockett. Both of them did have 14 targets last week. It just didn't end up working out. See, listen, if I would have put DK Metcalf as a sit last week, y'all would have been like, oh, yeah, I mean, it's Geno. But listen, this is why if we get something wrong, don't come back here and completely harass us, right? Because listen, if I looked at this matchup last week and I was like, I don't know if I trust Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf with Geno Smith. I'm just not loving it this week. But I knew for a fact that if I sat either of these guys again, you all were going to absolutely just spend the week completely tearing me down. Hey, we do our best over here, but that is something that comes up, right? When we're like, okay, we've missed on this guy in the past. We got a ton of hate for it. I don't know if I can do it again because I can't go through that for another week. We're going back to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett going up against New Orleans. This is a better matchup for them this week. So with Tyler Lockett, he's going to be lower in my rankings. Be careful with him. Part of me does want to sit him this week, but we saw some deep targets for him last week. They just didn't all connect. And because of that, Lockett was really one play away last week from ended up being a start. And DK Metcalf, he was pretty close. That was just an awful play at the end of the game for him, though. Pretty stupid to not just get out of bounds there and ended up fumbling the football, which cost 2 points, probably depending on what league that you play in. So he ended up being a miss last week as well. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. My start and sit analysis for the wide receiver position here in week 7. Make sure you hit that like button for me. And if you're new here to the Fantasy Headliners, make sure you subscribe and leave a comment down below. Is there someone you're super high on this week or maybe lower than the consensus? Appreciate you all tuning into this video. Glad to be out a little bit earlier this week. We'll see how it goes for us, though. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.